Satisfaction is derived from an outcome. Not necessarily a positive or negative outcome, but something that forces us to learn to achieve that outcome. I find this especially true when painting, where if I have to learn and adapt to achieve the outcome that I'm looking to achieve, the satisfaction of actually achieving it is greater than if I didn't have to learn at all. Now, that can often result in things going wrong, but when things go wrong, we learn what to do better next time. And although there's definitely an interesting topic of psychology here, I'm here to paint my plastic soldiers, not lecture you on the needs and wants of human existence. So anyway, I bought a Mutalith Vortex beast a couple of months ago, but I've never painted a model this big, so I was hesitant to actually paint it, because I didn't know what to do. What if I painted it wrong? But that's when I decided that perfection was the enemy of progression, and that he'd be a perfect opportunity to practice my airbrush on, something that ended up giving me a whole lot of satisfaction because I was challenged and learned throughout the process. And I know, airbrushes are the easy way out, but this model has some really interesting shapes on it, and I thought it would be a great way to try using the airbrush as much as possible and contrast some colors and just seeing what happens. So, after assembling, basing, and priming him, it was time to get cracking. Now, after priming him, I applied a base of Vallejo's charcoal. Now, generally, I love to use this color to rim the bases of pretty much all my models, but I love that it's basically a really dark blue-gray and thought it'd be a really interesting base for the beast. Now, you can see in some of the clips that the paint doesn't appear to be particularly thick. And this really comes with learning how to thin paints effectively, where I often find I seldom actually use the right consistency of thinner and flow improver, although something that I've definitely been getting better with over time. After having applied that base, I then applied some midnight purple on some of the exposed fleshy bits. So I think his fists, around his feet, and then also on his chest where you can see a whole bunch of the exposed muscle. Now, after having applied this, I thought I'd give some inks a go. Now, I've got a whole bunch of inks that I typically use for achieving stuff like fires and then blending together some colors, and then also used for underpainting and adding shadows. And I thought I'd give it a go on Big Guy here to add some volumetric highlighting on some of that charcoal. And although I don't mind it too much, I think it doesn't contrast well enough, and it really just blended in with the darkness of the charcoal, so you can't really see it. But again, live and learn. But wanting to push that highlight a bit further, I initially went in with some of Vallejo's dark blue-gray, and then followed it up with some of Vallejo's light green-blue. And I feel that this combination together really helps to build that volumetric highlighting a bit better, a lot more so than the blue ink did. Now, after having done the main part of the body, I then went back in with some midnight purple with a brush to reapply some of that base coat to help re-establish the volumes of the muscles, because some of the transition and the volume of the muscles got lost when using some of those other colors as highlights. Now, when using the brush, it honestly didn't work particularly well, and as such I went back in with some lustful purple to act in a very similar way to what I did with the body, where I used this to basically establish the highlights, which really meant that the brushwork of that midnight purple wasn't particularly useful, but again, live and learn. After having done that, I went in with some light green blue and added some highlights to the horns and spikes that are all over this model, and it helped just to build that little bit of contrast that still didn't really exist on the vast majority of the model. Now, with the big guy all done, it was time to go and tackle the sun. Now, like the rest of the model, I was very unsure about how I was going to tackle this. I just knew that I wanted to add a whole bunch of different colors in here to really build the contrast, but in my head I couldn't really figure out what to do, so I just went for it. So to begin, I started with a base of midnight purple. After that, I then went back in with the blue ink, letting it try and shine again, and applied this to the outer section and inner sections that I initially based in the Midnight Purple. Now I was expecting this to work a little bit better, but really the whole thing with inks is that they will typically just make things darker, whatever they hit, especially a dark blue ink. Hitting that on top of purple, it's not going to do a whole lot. So I expected it to do a little bit more, but I shouldn't really be that surprised. Regardless, I then went in with some blue-green to reinforce what I was trying to achieve with the blue ink, and I feel this worked much better. After having done that, I then went in with a brush and applied some Hull Red to the center of the sun itself. Now, I didn't really want to use an airbrush for this because the overspray would have blasted all over and just wouldn't have looked particularly good. Having applied the Hull Red, I then went in with some magenta and applied this to the outside ring as well as connecting to the center to blend the lines that exist between the Hull Red on the center as well as those outside rings to build a little bit of uniformity between the different colors. To soften all the colors, I then went in with some light green blue, and honestly, in hindsight, I feel that I may have overdone this a little bit and really dulled down the brightness that existed between the blue-green as well as the magenta. So I think it still looks okay, but in hindsight, I feel I should have done maybe less or not at all. After that, I then focused on the sun. So I applied some scarlet red to the center of the sun, then some sun yellow hitting less than the scarlet red, and then finally a little burst of white ink in the middle to really sell that effect of it being bright, hot, and very dangerous in the middle. So with the sun all done, it was time to move on to those tentacles. Now, I really wanted to push the contrast that existed, especially between the inside and the outside of the tentacles. So I really wanted to make use of similar colors that I used on the sun, or in fact, exactly the same colors I used on the sun, of the magenta and the blue-green. So initially, just like the sun, I applied a base of Midnight Purple. After that, I applied some blue-green to the center of the tentacles and then followed that up with some magenta on the outside. So basically it went magenta into the Midnight Purple into the inside of the tentacle being that blue-green. Now again, similar to the sun and being a little bit more careful this time, I used some light green blue to soften the transitions between all the colors. And I feel that this worked much better than it did on the sun, where the real punch of the magenta and the teal wasn't lost as much as it was on the sun. But I really feel that the light green blue helped to blend the colors together and added a little bit of extra highlight on some of the more exposed outside sections of the tentacle, which I'm pretty happy with. After having done that, I then went in with some charcoal using a brush and painted those. And then for the fleshy bits of the tentacles, which it would have been very difficult to do with an airbrush, I then went back in with the brush, initially applying a base coat of Hull Red, and then mixing in more and more barbarian flesh for each subsequent layer, until it was just barbarian flesh highlighting some of the more exposed areas of the flesh. For the snot bits, started with a base of Vallejo's dark green, and then very similar to the previous step, working in more and more goblin green to help build those layers and establish some more of the highlights in some of the more exposed areas. With the model all done, it's now time to tackle the base, and I use the same approach that I use for all my Thousand Suns bases. So to begin with, Vallejo Earth for the sand and Dark Blue Grey for the rocks. Hit them with some Agrax and non-oil respectively. When that's dry brush the initial colors on, and then hit the sand with some Plague Brown and hit the rocks with some Stonewall Grey, focusing on hitting smaller sections of the base to focus on providing additional highlights. Then I chucked on some cute little flowers from Gamer Grass. Absolutely love this company. The grass they provide is fantastic. Rimmed the base with some charcoal, and bam, there you go. I'm pretty happy with how he's turned out. In reflection, I feel the main body could probably have had some additional work done to help push the contrast a bit heavier. And next time, I'll probably want to play with inks a bit more, where I kind of saw where I wanted to go with the blue ink, but it just didn't quite work. So potentially if I'd used a lighter base coat rather than charcoal, which is obviously a very dark grey, if I'd gone with something a little bit lighter, then the inks would have worked a bit better, I feel, but it's all part of it, right? Living and learning. Now, as I mentioned, I've learned a bunch painting this model, and if anything, it's really helped me realize that you really shouldn't be aiming for perfect when trying to paint a model. And it's sometimes the best way to go about painting a model is to simply jump in and see what the vibe is at the time. Because I mean, at the end of the day, painting is really just supposed to be a hobby, right? To relax and chill out to. But I really feel that if you're challenged when undertaking painting, it's forcing you to use your brain to overcome challenges and problem solve, which really enhances the overall experience for me, where just batch painting the same stuff over and over and over and over and over again can get pretty dull and boring because you're not forced to learn and engage your brain to overcome issues and stuff like that, right? So I really feel that it's in everyone's best interest to challenge themselves at least every now and again when painting, because without doing that, you're not going to become a better painter, and really I feel you're just going to burn out. I mean, that's my own perspective. You might have a different view on things, but that's pretty much it for today. I hope you enjoyed. A little bit of a different video from what I normally do, but I hope you've enjoyed, and have a great day. See ya.